Hello, thanks for joining us on our live semi-weekly updates and Q&A. We're on TikTok and Instagram at the moment, and I think we'll probably upload this to Facebook later on. Feel free to put in questions about whatever you want. I'll try and answer them. Also like, share, all that kind of stuff. We try to go live once a week, update people on some of the key political events, some of the key work that I've been involved in here in the Dáil and outside of the Dáil, and answer people's questions as we go. The two things I wanted to just start on today, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. Anything you can do about pet-friendly rentals in Cork City, I don't know, but maybe someone in the chat can help. But the two things I wanted to focus on was the SIPO case, with a really important victory last Friday, which I want to talk about SIPO and Leo Varadkar, and then also the horrifying case people have definitely seen, the attack on Natasha O'Brien by Cathal Crotty, and really inspiring response by Natasha O'Brien and the public on the streets in protest right around the country. Anyway, to start with the SIPO case, this goes back a long time. It goes back to 2019. Leo Varadkar, the government, he was then Taoiseach. The government was negotiating a new GP contract with the Irish Medical Organisation, the IMO, and at that time, Leo Varadkar gave a copy of the draft agreement to his friend, political supporter, Matthew O'Toole, who was also, not accidentally, the head of a rival organisation to the IMO, the NAGP. So he did it to benefit his friend and then to get some political benefit back himself. So yeah, that's what happened back in 2019. This was revealed then by great journalism by The Village magazine in 2020. You might remember they had a front page story, Leo the lawbreaker, and they revealed all of this. None of the facts were disputed by Leo Varadkar. He kind of claimed that he had legal advice to say that was defamatory or whatever, but I asked him in the Dáil, were you going to sue them? He did not give an answer, and he never sued them, of course, because what they were saying was absolutely true. The government round Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Greens, they all came to his defence. They ensured that he stayed in position. At that stage, he was then in Tallaght. And I complained to SIPO, which is the Standards in Public Office Commission, which is meant to look after ethics, meant to protect against corruption amongst politicians and so on. And so I went to them. I had a letter, which I have here somewhere, outlining all the rule breaches that they were involved in and saying they should investigate him. But then they, 2 years later, at the end of 2022, said, sorry, no, we're not going to investigate him. And they basically didn't provide very good reasons. They basically told me, Leo Varadkar says that he did it as Taoiseach. Yes, he leaked it. He doesn't dispute the fact that he leaked it, but he did it as Taoiseach, and therefore they can't investigate. And they said, once he says that, we can't investigate. It was a really terrible decision, because it means no matter what any future Taoiseach or government minister or Taoiseach was to do in the future in terms of corrupt behaviour, you could take a bribe from someone, and you say, oh, I took a bribe, and then I did this, but don't worry, when I took the bribe, I did it in my capacity as Taoiseach. And once I say that, you can't investigate me. And if SIPO, the same rules apply, then SIPO would simply say, oh, sorry, they said he did it as Taoiseach, we can't investigate whether he did or he didn't, and that's the end of it. So it was terrible decision by SIPO. It emerged then that was a controversial decision within SIPO, so there was 5 members. There's one that, there's a 6th, but anyway, he wasn't relevant for this, he wasn't present for the voting. But there was 5 members, and it was the first time ever that they weren't unanimous. It was a 3-2 closely argued thing, where two of the most kind of independent people in the state, the Ombudsman and the Controller and Auditor General, said we disagree with this attack with the decision not to investigate Leo Varadkar, and they said this. One of them in particular wrote this letter internally saying, this is a disaster. Imagine if a court investigates this and orders us to do it. It'll completely discredit SIPO, it'll discredit all future decisions, etc. But anyway, the 3 of them went ahead with it and decided not to investigate Varadkar. So I then took a court case at the High Court. It's called a judicial review, seeking to overturn that decision of SIPO. The hearing was 18 weeks ago. We were meant to find the results in 6 to 8 weeks, they said, after that. And in that period of time, Leo Varadkar resigned. And then there was a long delay. Anyway, finally, last Friday, we got the judgment, which is here, which you can find online. I'll read out the key bit in it, which is that the court has concluded that the decision not to carry out an investigation was inadequately reasoned. In the premises, the applicant is entitled to an order quashing the decision on 9th November 2022, and the matter should be remitted to the Commission for further consideration. So in everyday language, they quashed the decision of SIPO not to investigate and said to SIPO, balls back in your court. Basically, SIPO should now investigate. They also raised a broader question mark over the idea that the Taoiseach can just say, oh, I did it as Taoiseach, therefore you can't investigate me. They say this proposition was not based, or certainly not based expressly, on a contention this is required by the Constitution. It is not for the court to fill in the blanks in the decision or to propose understandings that are not apparent on the face of the report. Later, in somewhere else, they said it is simply not clear how the Commission reached a conclusion that the matters that were subject to the complaint fell outside its remit. That leaves the applicant in a position where he is unable to understand the decision and whether or not a full and proper challenge can be brought in respect of the findings on the extent of the Commission's powers. So that was a very, very important victory, a victory for accountability, a victory for fight for ethics, for decent standards, for politicians to be held to account for their actions. It's People Before Profit that have been pursuing this, just like it's People Before Profit through me that have been pursuing Robert Troy. There was a hearing a couple of weeks ago that have pursued and resulted in multiple ministers having to resign because of corrupt and unethical behaviour. What happens next, right, is there's a hearing tomorrow in the High Court. It's a short one. But the ball is back in SIPO's court. There is basically three things that they could do. One is they could appeal it. It doesn't look like they're likely to do it, but they could, to the Supreme Court. They could try and come back with the same decision again and say, he did it as Taoiseach, but here's our reasons, better reasons than last time. But I think the judgment has made it difficult for them to do that. Or they can start an investigation into Varadkar. And what we're going to argue is that this needs to happen as quick as possible. And it needs to happen before the next general election, so he isn't finished as a TD if he doesn't stand again, or if he does stand again, so the people of Dublin West have the right to know whether he's guilty of the breaches of all these this ethics legislation. In my opinion, it's really clear that he is. Members must not use official information which is not in the public domain for personal gain or the personal gain of others. It's blatant. Office holders should respect confidences entrusted to them in the course of their official duties. It's really, really blatant that it's a breach. So that's very, very important. Okay, so a bunch of questions coming in. Maybe I'll answer some of the questions, but then move on to the other thing that I wanted to talk about, if that's okay. So people asking about the EU Migration Pact. I think it's scandalous. We voted against it last night. It passed by very narrowly. I think 7 votes is one of the closest votes that we've had. Really, this is about the right-wing parties across Europe trying to pretend, trying to be hard on migration, resulting in more people dying in the Mediterranean, vulnerable people trying to get to Europe, trying to escape horrendous situations. Over 3,000 people died last year. And this pact is about raising those borders higher. It's about the so-called externalisation of Europe's borders, so paying countries like Libya to have basically massive prison camps to keep asylum seekers in. It's about establishing detention centres. So in Ireland, children that arrive here seeking asylum could end up in detention centres with no right to leave them for months, effectively. I was in a detention centre for immigrants for just one night in Israel after I was in prison in Israel, and it was probably the grimmest experience of my life, just absolutely horrendous conditions. And that's the way these detention centres are right around the world. Effectively, it's a denial of the right of people to apply for asylum. It won't make life better for any ordinary person in Ireland. It won't build a home. It won't provide an extra hospital bed. It won't provide any better public services. It won't protect people from the cost of living crisis. It's just a mass act of distraction by the political establishment to try to make people think that migrants are the problem. Migrants are why you've a cost of living crisis. Migrants are why you've got a housing crisis. Migrants are why, whatever. And it's started to distract from their own failures. So I think it's really scandalous. It's why I voted against it last night. Where in Ireland am I from? I'm from Dublin. What are the penalties we found in violation of? I mean, really, SIPO doesn't have a load of powers, to be honest. Mostly it's just that they would find against them, and then the people would take that into account in terms of voting for him and so on. I don't know Gary Stevenson. Thoughts on the Labour Party? I mean, the original Labour Party of James Connolly was good. And I think there's lots of people down the years who joined the Labour Party for the right reasons. You still meet some people like that who think that Labour stands for ordinary workers. That's what it was established for. But look, Labour for a long time has been an establishment party. Many times they got people's votes on the basis of being an alternative, being an opposition. Most recently, after the crash, they've been a big deal of Labour's way or Frankfurt's way, and then they used people's votes to go back into government with Fine Gael, put the establishment back into power. At the moment, like during the European elections, they were posing a little bit left, talking about a left alliance, that, or a progressive alliance, that kind of thing. But after the council elections, right across the country, including on South Dublin, which includes like all Dublin South West, where I'm elected from, and they did deals with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. South Dublin, Dublin City, Fingal, right across the country. They chose not to do deals and try to have coalitions with the left, but instead did coalitions with the right, which just confirms the nature of the Labour Party, which is not a party for ordinary people. Yeah, well, the other thing I was going to talk about is people, I'm sure, saw the horrendous case whereby this guy, Cathal Crotty, serving member of the Defence Forces, was shouting homophobic abuse against a man in Limerick. Natasha O'Brien very bravely intervened and said, stop that. And then he attacked her mercilessly, punched her. This is like a trained soldier. It's a fire alarm. I don't know if it's a test or a real fire alarm. All right, we better stop just in case that is a real fire alarm. All right, we'll start back. Sorry about that. The fire alarm went off, and then the minute we went offline, it stopped. So it's a test. Yeah, there was funny comments when the fire alarm was going on. People were in the comments on TikTok saying it's a fake fire alarm, as if I think the questions were too hard, and I had someone go out and set a fire or something. So if it happens again, you know what I was doing. I just can't stand your very hard questions. Our government looking to lower social welfare payments. I mean, I'm sure they'd like to, but I don't think they're currently planning to. They basically instead erode them by inflation, When I was talking about the horrendous situation, people saw Natasha O'Brien bravely stood up against homophobic abuse by this guy Cathal Crotty, serving soldier, and then he used his army skills, punched her to the ground, and then kept punching her. I listened to an interview with her. She said, she believed that she was going to die there, and then afterwards he boasted about it on Snapchat, saying 2 to put her down, 2 to knock her out, something like that. Absolutely horrendous stuff. And then that act was compounded by then the judge saying that, oh no, he basically not to give him a fully suspended sentence, not to give him any jail time, and then telling her that she should be happy because he pleaded guilty, and kind of she did him a favour. Whereas there's CCTV evidence of it happening, there's a reason why, there's the likely reason why he pleaded guilty. So this provoked rightly an outpouring of anger about misogyny, about violence assaults against women, about how the justice system treats those. And Natasha O'Brien has been incredibly inspiring. She's just been so outspoken, been everywhere. I went to a rally outside the Dáil where she was speaking. She spoke at a rally in Dublin on Saturday. She was at something in Limerick then. I think on Saturday she was in something in Limerick as well. Then on the day after, maybe Wednesday, she was in Limerick, and I think she's in Cork. I mean, really incredible in terms of helping to create a movement about gender-based violence. I think also shedding a light on the reality that it seems that there are multiple Defence Forces personnel who have convictions for violent assault on women or in general, and who are still serving, which it seems to me that it makes no sense for someone with a conviction for violent assault should continue in either the army or the Gardaí. Like, they're in a real position of authority and power, and the idea that they should be there clearly doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, in terms of the next steps, we Breed Smith spoke about it in the Dáil during the week. Obviously, there was a standing ovation for Natasha O'Brien in the Dáil, and the government saying the usual things of, zero tolerance, this will never happen again. I think obviously everyone knows that, not to trust the government on this. I think there's a danger that the government will just try and use it to try and push a kind of like a carceral agenda, like pushing the idea that the prisons are the answer to like any of the problems that we face in our society, as opposed to saying, look, we need to look at the misogynistic society that we have. We need to look at education. Of course, like someone like Cathal Crotty should be in jail. We need to look at the state services and the state forces in terms of the defence forces and the Gardaí, and not have people convicted of crime, convicted of like violent assaults, violent crime in those forces. So we're going to continue to rise that. Bernie there is asking about the missing children from Tusla. So yeah, I put in a parliamentary question about this. I got an answer on the 30th of May, so I would have put it in about a week before. So I have the latest figures, which I'm going to continue to pursue in the Dáil. So as of the 9th of May 2024, there were 11 children missing from mainstream care, i.e. not separated children seeking international protection, not asylum seekers. So these would be Irish children. Of those 11 children, 7 have been missing between 1 and 3 days, 4 have been missing between 3 and 7 days. None had been missing for a longer period. So hopefully, I don't know, hopefully all those children were since found. Then there are 23 children in the separated children seeking international protection service who remain missing. Of these, 1 child is missing since 2022, 13 since 2023, and 9 to date in 2024. So that's children missing for a long time, and indicates the state not taking proper care of. These are children on their own, asylum seekers looking for care, and the state has lost them. And in many cases, these children will what's known as age out. They will hit 18, and then they're no longer missing children, and they go off those statistics, even though they're still missing, they haven't appeared anywhere. They could be the subject of significant exploitation. So we'll continue to raise this in the Dáil. Just trying to answer some questions. Does Helen McEntee want to make crime illegal? Hi, Owen. Crime is illegal. Okay, sorry, James is asking some questions that are they're not accurate, James, right? Because I saw one earlier, but I couldn't. I have to scroll up to find it. But you said, how come refugee men get €584 to live on and Irish people only get €232? That's crazy, James. I don't know who's telling you those lies. That's simply not true. Refugee men, asylum seekers, get €38.50 to live on a week, not €584. €38.50. That's if they're in an international protection centre, which they're hugely overcrowded. They're even worse than homeless accommodation for Irish people. If they are on the street in a tent, then they get about €110 a week. So that's on the street, no food provided, no nothing provided. That's all they're getting. Again, less than people on the Dáil get. So someone is telling you lies and trying to make you think that the problem is asylum seekers as opposed to the problem is the government. And I would really point out that people who are telling these lies, they are outriders for the government. They're doing the government's dirty work. They want to distract people from the fact that the government has handed hundreds of millions of euros in this year to developers by suspending development levies. The government hands hundreds and hundreds of millions, billions of euros a year in effectively tax-free profits to big vulture funds in this country. The government hands billions of euros a year to major multinational corporations by allowing them to use Ireland as a tax haven. And the government wants to distract from all of that by having people talk about lies. I'm not saying you're telling a lie because you might believe it, but it's not right, it's wrong. But the person who told you knew what they were saying was a lie by saying someone's on €584. Simply not true. Ruble, if you email me on paul.murphy@oireachtas.ie or paul.murphy@oir.ie, you up the flats. Why avoid the question on why some were permitted to abstain, not attend last night, please? Which vote are you talking about? So pretty much every vote, there's some people will be missing and some people will be will abstain. During the migration pact last night, actually no one abstained. I saw there was a bunch of far-right Twitter accounts who were sharing a picture which showed all those who voted for, all those who voted against, Neil, I was one of those, and all those abstained, Stain, and Stain said 0. And they were saying, why do people abstain? And they obviously can't understand, Irish didn't understand what Stain is, fair enough, but these are the people who go on about being patriots. What the white dots that you would have seen is those people were missing. They could be missing for a good reason or they could be missing for a bad reason. I'll give you a good example, is that there was a vote to make Jack Chambers the new Minister for Finance and allow the government to continue. There was 9 independents voted for Jack Chambers, including Mark McSharry, including just a whole range of them, all the kind of regional group ones, all the independents in there. 9 of them voted in favour, plus Mark McSharry, and then the Healy Rays, both of them were missing, which I thought was likely a strategic being missing, that they would have done a deal to be missing, you know. So that's kind of what that's about. Paul, can you accept that people have different views and not everyone wants a liberal Ireland? Yes, I can. I accept that some people want a liberal Ireland. I don't want a liberal Ireland. I want an eco-socialist Ireland. I don't know what kind of Ireland you want. So yes, I accept that people have different views. How to contact me, please. Email is probably the best. paul.murphy@oireachtas.ie. Don't we elect you to vote? You do, yeah. I mean, you may not elect me. I certainly vote. You'll find me that. But yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that. Like half these people don't turn up. Some of the time, not half, but some of them don't turn up. And some of them abstain. Sometimes strategically. Why does your party dislike the Defence Force? We don't dislike the Defence Force. We don't dislike... Actually, we've been the foremost force in here fighting for the rights of ordinary soldiers. So fighting for the rights being in a trade union, for example. We had a bill in the last Dáil about that. We've been highlighting the poverty pay given to ordinary soldiers. But, one, we're opposed to the militarisation agenda that the government is pushing together with the kind of European establishment. They want to get rid of neutrality. They have a definite agenda there. And 2, obviously, we're against any misogyny, the likes of behaviour of Cathal Crotty. I presume you wouldn't agree with that either. Sorry, I'm just going to try to scroll up. What was your opinion on the results of the local elections? Surprised? Not really surprised, no. I mean, if you'd asked me 2 months before the local elections, then I would have been surprised. In terms of the elections, like as they played out, I think it became clear that Sinn Féin in particular was like tanking compared to where they were in the opinion polls. In the opinion polls a year ago, they were over 30%. In the local elections, they got about between 11 and 12%, so they did very, very badly in reality. We should be clear, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael lost seats, they lost votes, it was their worst election ever, but relatively speaking, compared to the polls, they stabilised. And I think basically what happened is that the government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, played a very dirty trick on ordinary people where they tried to centre the issue of migration. Every week they were getting rid of the tents at the canal, putting up barriers at the canal, means testing Ukrainians, a whole series of like policies of performative cruelty that don't make life any better for Irish people whatsoever, but were just about making the government look hard on migration. And then I think Sinn Féin fell into the government's trap on that by welcoming each of those measures and saying if we were in government we'd go even further. And so ended up effectively fighting the election on the terrain of migration, where they were never going to win, as opposed to Sinn Féin should have said, as I think we said, no, the issues here are the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the health crisis, and the government has responsibility for these things. And we refuse to let the government and their economic system and the people they rule in favour of, in other words, the super rich in this country, we refuse to let them off the hook by blaming migrants. So I hope that Sinn Féin learns the lesson in terms of the next election. We're pushing for a vote left, transfer left pact. We want to clear out Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. We We think Sinn Féin and the Social Democrats and others should join us in making a commitment to say we will not go into coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, to give people the chance of electing an alternative at the next election. We think that would give people a real a reason to go out and vote. It would motivate people. Sorry, I'm trying to flick through the questions. Situation on decriminalisation. In terms of the official process, slow, not be done by the end of it all. They just want to drag these things out. They want to talk in the language of public health, not criminalisation, but in reality, they don't really want to go down that road. Gino Kenny, on behalf of People for Profit, has introduced a bill to decriminalise possession of small amounts of cannabis, and we'll continue to push that in the Dáil. Any advice for a leftist trying to organise within a rural community? Just try and get a core of people together, I think, is the first step. If you get a core of people together, discuss the ideas, come up with a plan, go out and discuss left-wing socialist ideas in a way that is relevant to ordinary people. See if there's a local campaign you could get involved in, or build a local aspect of a national campaign like housing or environmental crisis or whatever. That's some advice. Elaine, is the apartments beside the old Jacobs Inn a vulture fund or part of SDCC? That one is, I'm fairly certain, is not SDCC. That is a private fund. I think it is built to rent. I couldn't absolutely swear to that. There is ones over, like beside the library, which are SDCC, which are still the affordable housing ones are still far too expensive. They're not really affordable. But yeah, Apple user, stop stuttering. Thank you. Am I Eurosceptic? Depends on what you mean. If you mean am I like, Nigel Farage or one of these right-wing Brexiteers who think that Ireland should be all on its own, no connection to other countries, just protect our borders, stop the boats, that kind of stuff, no, I'm not. But if you mean that I am opposed to this European Union, I think this European Union, I've been in it, I was a member of the European Parliament, is fundamentally undemocratic. I think it serves the interests of the rich. There's a huge number of, for every MEP, there's thousands of lobbyists for corporations. It's dominated by those. It's dominated by a military agenda. It's racist. It's imperialistic. I'm absolutely opposed to this European Union. I think we need a very, very different type of Europe, a Europe that serves the interests of ordinary people and is genuinely democratic, what I would call a socialist Europe. I'll just do a couple of easy questions. A couple of questions, and then I got to run. Why don't you and our government have controlled immigration? Do you have a plan to ruin Ireland? So firstly, I'm not in the government. I'm opposed to the government. I'm opposed to the government signing up to the EU Migration Pact, for example. So I don't have a common plan with the government. I'm completely opposed to the government's plan. I think you would have the impression, the way it's discussed, that we're seeing a flood of asylum seekers, an increased number. The truth is the numbers are going down year on year. So 2022, we had the highest number when you add Ukrainians and non-Ukrainian asylum seekers together. That came down in 2023, it's coming down again in 2024. So this is a manageable situation. We need to give people decent shelter. Nobody needs to be sleeping on the streets. And you need to ask yourself, why are people sleeping on the streets whenever there's empty beds in the international protection and Ukrainian accommodation system? And the answer is because the government wants everyone just to be talking about that and thinking that that's what the problem is in our society. Without immigration, we don't have a health service, along with lots of other services in our society. Ben Buckley over on Instagram asks, does PPP support United Ireland? And if so, why don't you designate as nationalist in the north? So yes, we support a socialist United Ireland. Why don't we designate as nationalist? Because we're not nationalist. We think there is a third tradition in Ireland beyond the green and orange, which is the red of James Connolly, which is about uniting ordinary workers against exploitation, against capitalism, and against imperialism. Older people in the flats. Am I ignoring your question? I'm not. We're waiting for 25 years for transfers to suitable accommodation. That's outrageous. I'm dealing with, maybe not many cases in 25 years. That's nuts. If you're in South Dublin County Council, definitely send me an email, paul.murphy@oireachtas.ie, and we'll do our best on it. That's obviously really outrageous, because often as well, even from the point of view of the management of the whole housing stock, you've older people living in 3-4 bedroom houses or whatever who want to move to appropriate older person accommodation, and then a family could move in to 3 or 4 beds. So that's absolutely madness. I'll finish on this one. Is it possible for any other party, minus the big three, that can make a government? Yes. Yes, it is. Not if the local election results were repeated. Then Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and some right-wing independents will be back. And that's what, all those people who thought that by voting for, I don't know, Gavin Pepper or whoever, they were going to make a difference in the opposition. No, they're not. They're doing the government a favour. They're doing Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael a favour, because they've undermined the largest opposition party, which was Sinn Féin. But I think if us, Sinn Féin, the Soc Dems and others came together and said there's going to be an alternative, we're not going in Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, we want there to be a left government, I think that would inspire people and the polls would change again. It's not, the polls aren't far off there being a possibility of a government without Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So the big three, I assume you're actually talking Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. The big three includes Sinn Féin. No, it's probably not possible to make a government without the big three if you include Sinn Féin. The question for me, though, is whether you can have a government without Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. That's what we need to have. All right, I will go for now. There is no right-wing independence in the Dáil. You should come in here and listen someday. Listen to the likes of Richard O'Donoghue going on, giving out about the minimum wage. Michael Collins going on about the need for deregulation for Airbnb. These people going on, listen to Manny McGrath going on about George Soros and the WEF non-stop. There's plenty of right-wing independence in the Dáil. We're governed by a right-wing government. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are right-wing parties. Anyway, I will go for now. I finished with James, because I don't know, James, if you check what I said to you earlier there, you'll see that I was telling you the truth, that someone is feeding you misinformation, right? Someone's not telling you the truth and you need to wonder why. You say here, Paul, you got to see where Irish people are coming from and start standing by Irish people. See, I don't see the world as being divided into Irish people and non-Irish people. I see the world being divided into ordinary people, working class people, young people, small farmers, the vast majority of people, and on the other hand, the super rich. So people sometimes say, we need to have a government that looks after their own. This government does look after their own. Their own is not ordinary people like you, no matter what the colour of your skin is. Their own is the big agribusiness. Their own is the big developers, the big corporate landlords. Their own is the big multinational corporations. Their own is the super rich. That's who they represent, right? And they want to have ordinary people divided between white, non-white, Irish, non-Irish, traveller, men, women, LGBTQ people, whatever, people, disabled people. They want to divide ordinary people into those different categories and think that it's the other that is the problem. The problem is those at the top of our society, not those at the bottom. And I think that's how we get strong, is if we unite, if we refuse to be divided, we refuse to fall for these divisive tactics that they're using at the moment and the tools that they're using, like the far right, to try and spread misinformation like you've been fed, and to spread hatred and fear. Instead, we need to come together like we did in the water charges. That's how we beat the water charges. We had all sorts of people from all walks of life coming together to say we need to get rid of these austerity taxes and engaging in mass non-payment. That's what we need to do again about the housing crisis. That's what we need to do about the health crisis. That's what we need to do about the whole way our society is run. We need to turn our society upside down and run it in the interests of ordinary people. All right. Good luck. Nice to talk to you all. I'll be back next week with a bit of luck. Bye bye.